Hi everybody, Josh Knight the First here again with another Exade replay, coming to you with episode 10 of Kamen Rider Exade. Let's get right into it. So with this episode, we're a fifth of the way through the series, and let's go ahead and talk about what happened as of last week's episode with the outbreak of the Bugster virus that Graphite has perpetrated out into the city. Now, there's a lot of people sick, the news is covering it, the virus is spreading, but nobody seems to know what exactly it is. It's a fever, but nobody can seem to find any sort of viral cause. Of course, everybody in the CR knows what's going on, but they don't want to spread too much information. Now, the biggest part of this episode, the crux of it really, the big message, is that Emu has to learn the lesson from Dr. Kyotaro, who is fading fast, quite literally, that you can't do everything alone. This whole time, Emu has been focusing on himself. He's been banking his abilities as a gamer to get through the series, really to get through everybody's problems, everybody's sickness, but that's not the best way of doing things. That makes sense as a Kamen Rider, but at the same time, Dr. Kyotaro reminds him, when I saved you all those years ago, I didn't do it alone. I had a team with me. I had an anesthesiologist. I had nurses. I had other doctors on hand. It wasn't just a one-person operation, which makes sense. That's a good message to get across, but I wonder how well that's going to fit in beyond this episode. And it goes back to things that were said by the actors during the press conference. A lot of them seem to have likened the plot of Exade or the feel of Exade to a writer series they saw growing up, which was Ryuki, where there were a lot of writers at odds with each other. There's a lot of that here in this episode, but eventually they all had to work together to defeat Graphite. I would prefer that they all get along, but at this point in the story, it kind of makes more sense as far as pushing the story forward to have them still fight. And we see a lot of this as the other three writers are still trying to fight Graphite in his upgraded form, while Emu's off to the side trying to heal up. We see a lot of infighting between Snipe, Brave, and Laser as they try to take on Graphite. No, I want him. No, he's mine. You know, this, that, and the other. But really, nobody's really getting the job done. They want to, but they can't get past their own egos. Now, for a good part of the episode, Emu feels very down on himself. He can't seem to get past this idea of, well, yes, I get that I need a team, but I don't know how to pull a team together. I don't think I can work with these people, and granted, they don't give him a reason to think that way, and he doesn't seem to see a way past that. But it's interesting how they decide to show how he overcomes that. So what we end up seeing is that Hiro gets a phone call from Emu telling him, hey, look dude, I'm sorry, I can't do this here, let me give you Drago Knight Hunter Z, you can have it. Hiro comes to retrieve it, and then the other writers show up saying, hey, wait, no, he promised it to me. The odd thing about this is that Emu seems to have played the other three writers against each other. If I can't get them to work together willingly, then I'll just trick them to work together for something they all want. Now, the interesting part about that is the personality switch that is very obvious to most everybody watching. From the first episode up until now, we've seen this effect that's been done that whenever Emu goes into his gamer mode, there's always this blast of wind to his face and then a slight smile on his face. That's been the way of signaling, okay, he's no longer thinking as a doctor, he's thinking as a competitive gamer. He seems to have done the same thing in this episode, but there was a very obvious switch, being his eyes lighting up pinkish red. Now, a lot of people are theorizing, well, is this a split personality? Is this the effect of the Drago Knight Hunter Z Gashot on him? Who knows? The one thing that does seem to be apparent is that he willingly wanted to do this. He willingly thought outside of his doctor, normal, calm self to try and find a way to make the situation easier to handle. And the funny thing about it is, it worked. Everybody seems to have ganged up on him exactly the way he wanted to. It didn't seem to be the effects of Drago Knight Hunter Z. He wanted to do this. He tapped into a part of himself that seemed to know better. Now, when it's all said and done, they do end up going along with the plan once they realize, oh, okay, we've kind of been duped and everything works out. But up until that point, the other three writers, aside from only wanting things for themselves, also distrust Emu, because most of them know, going back to last episode, that there's something weird about him. There's something odd about the fact that he doesn't seem to have had the operation to become a Kamen Rider. Now, this of course ties into the most recent movie that just came out this weekend over there in Japan, Kamen Rider Heisei Generations, where the other previous writers come back to help him. A lot of story is going to be told in that movie that is apparently very relevant here to the plot of the show as we see it, but for those of us here in the States, we won't get that information until much later, or until somebody puts spoilers up on a website, so I won't delve too much into that right now. So basically what happens is that the way they solve this problem is that they have to beat the Drago Knight Hunter Z armor off of Emu, that way they can also, I guess, upload their own battle data to it. Emu at some point must have realized this is what was necessary, because after they do successfully beat the armor off of him, the Gashot splits into 4. And we were explaining, oh, these are copies of them because this is a 4-player game. This is how it was meant to be played. In function, the way this seems to be most similar to those of us over here in the West would be something akin to Mario Kart DS, where one person has the cartridge and then the other players can have the option of download play and play the game without actually having a copy of it. And as such, the result is that all of the riders get a piece of the Drago Knight Hunter Z armor. Emu gets the chest and the head, Brave gets the right arm, Snipe gets the left arm, and Laser gets the arms and the legs. And after a bit of infighting, they still manage to overcome Graphite, and he's dead. He's gone. Say goodbye to Graphite. He bit it this episode. As such, that means that Graphite joins a group of villains who were there for the first part of the series and actually were pretty good, and you wish they would have lasted longer, like say the Nazca Dopan in Double, or Phoenix over in Wizard. They were charismatic, you liked them, and you wish they'd lasted longer, but they've kind of got to bite the dust to make way for other villains. But now that Graphite's been defeated, that leaves an interesting question now. Considering everything that we've been told up until this point, Graphite was a good chunk of motivation for Hero wanting to be a common writer. He was the person that wanted the most to defeat Graphite because Graphite took away his girl all those years ago. Now that he's gone, what does that mean for Hero's character? Is he going to go back to just being a one-note, oh, I'm better than you at being a doctor or a surgeon? What does that mean for him? Really, I'm worried about that whole family there, because without that motivation, Hero can just be a one-note character, and he might get written off into mediocrity that way, and then his father's just become one-note in that he's the comic relief. And it's interesting to see that that's where they went with this episode. Hero's dad was the primary source of comedy. Emu didn't stub his toe on anything. Poppy People Papo was energetic, only there at the end, but not funny in any way, shape, or form. So I wonder, since we are now a fifth of the way through the series, how that's going to play out for this next arc, let's say the next 10 episodes or so. These first 10 were enough to get you interested in this series. It's one thing to say, okay, we got these 10 episodes and it's interesting enough, but at this point you've got to shift gears now, much the same way in Kamen Rider Gaim. If you sat through the first 10 episodes, you were rewarded because they had a story ready for the next 20, 30, 40 episodes to keep you pushing forward and want you to feel like you wanted to see where that story was going to go. I really hope they know what they're doing here. What we do know is that next week's episode is going to have a big reveal. Everybody will know who the identity of Kamen Rider Genmu is, and that's going to have some big ramifications. Now we're going to get to see what it is that Palad and Kuroto Dan have been plotting this whole time, gathering all this data from the other writers and how exactly they're going to implement that. But you guys tell me what you thought. Do you like the series so far, and are you going to stick with it? Do you think it was too early for Graphite to bite the dust, and what do you think Genmu's going to do with that new Gasha that he seems to get next week? Tell me in the comments below. And of course, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at Josh Knight First. This has been another Exade replay for episode 10 of the series Uneven Doctors. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.